Okay, it always seems that the bad guys get the most attention. So we're going to have a full session on, I'm going to try to cover as much ground as I can. Again, it's still a bird's eye view of divine rebellions. And yes, the S on the end of the word is intentional. I like to start this session this way. If you asked the average Christian, why is the world so wicked? Why is humanity so depraved? Why is the world the mess that it is? Okay? The answer you're going to invariably get is the fall. Okay? The fall. The fall gets blamed for everything. If you asked an Israelite or a first century Jew the same question, hey, why is the world so wicked? Why is the world such a mess? Why do we have this chaos and suffering and so on and so forth, sin? That is not the answer you would get. The Israelite and the first century Jew would not just say, well, it's the fall, Genesis 3. The answer you would get is, well, there's actually three reasons why the world is the way it is. The first one is the fall. They would acknowledge that. The fall is the entrance of rebellion into God's good world, both on a supernatural level, because we have a supernatural being that decides to interfere and impede with what God wants for humanity in Genesis. But there are also two other rebellions. There are two other reasons why the world is the way it is. And these other two reasons, you have a rebellion in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, with the sons of God, and you have what happens at Babel. Unfortunately, and I'm going to say a little bit as to why this is in a moment, but again, it's been my experience that the second one of these, the Sons of God episode, is regularly either ignored in the church or demythologized. It's explained away as something other than a supernatural rebellion. So you never get this part of the Israelite Jewish worldview. The Genesis 6 episode is a huge deal in intertestamental literature, which bleeds into the New Testament because the New Testament writers are part of what we call the Second Temple period. You get the temple rebuilt after the return from exile, all the way into 70 AD when it's destroyed again. That period, the New Testament is part of that. What happens in Genesis 6 is a really, really big deal in their view of depravity that overspreads the earth. So if we sort of don't have that one count, if we sort of remove that from the picture, we miss some significant elements to not only understand certain things in the New Testament, but also certain things in the Old. The third one, Babel, this is a Sunday school story that everybody knows. I didn't run into Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9 until I was a doctoral student, as far as what in the world is going on there. And part of the reason is because our modern English translations do not utilize the Dead Sea Scrolls in those verses, and in other verses in Deuteronomy 32 as well. So we never see what the text originally had there and why it's important, because Paul and others dip into Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9 with a fair amount of regularity. And that passage is the foundation for what we today loosely call spiritual warfare. But you'll never see it unless, again, you have like the Dead Sea Scrolls to help you. You'll never see it. Even though Paul alludes to it in Acts 17, you'll just never see it. It'll look like what Paul's saying has no context for it, like he's just making something up, because I can't find that in the Old Testament. Again, it's a textual issue, it's a manuscript issue. But all three of these, again, would be the Israelite Jewish explanation for why the world is the mess that it is. And as far as what, again, pun intended, I'm so clever, the fallout of the three rebellions, the three falls, if you will. The first one, what that incurs to humanity is estrangement from God and death. Romans 5:12, wherefore so by one man sin entered the world, and death by sin, so that death passed upon all men. By the way, it doesn't say guilt there. It says death. Death passed upon all men. So we have an estrangement from God and we have a death problem. The second one is viewed, again, by Second Temple period Jews as a root cause of the proliferation of depravity. It's not that humans aren't depraved, because they fell in Genesis 3. These were willful acts of rebellion. And you have plenty of other willful acts of sin that ensue from it. But Genesis 6 was thought to be about the proliferation, the acceleration of depravity among human beings. And in the Old Testament period, it was a lethal threat that arose from this event to the people of God as the people of God were known then, the Israelites. And the third one is really about abandonment and fragmentation of God, and not only God to the rest of humanity besides Israel, but really all of the nations from each other, and especially to God. Now, if you were a Second Temple period Jew, and your answer to why the world is the mess that it is, were these three things, you expect the Messiah to cure all three problems, not just one. You expect the Messiah to not just fix Genesis 3, but to fix the others. And that is actually what you get in the New Testament.